Today we're going to be solving systems in a new way by a process called elimination. And what this means is we are going to eliminate one of the variables, either the x's or the y's, by following this important step. We want to create opposites. Just a reminder, with opposites, if I had a positive 4, the opposite would be negative 4. If I had a positive 2, the opposite would be negative 2. If I had variables included, the opposite of 3x would be negative 3x. So we want to create opposites in order to eliminate a variable. So if you copy down the first problem, what we want to first examine is whether or not we have opposites. So if I look at my x's, I have 8x and I have 2x. Those two are not the opposites of each other. When I look at my y's, I have a minus 9y and a minus 9y. They're very close to being opposites. So what I can do is I can create opposites. In order to create opposites, I would need one of those minus 9y's to become a plus 9y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply everything on the bottom by a negative 1. Because if I do it to one term, I have to do it to all three of them. So what happens is I'm going to multiply 2x by negative 1, which would give me a negative 2x. I'm going to multiply negative 1 by a negative 9y, which would be a positive 9y. And I'm going to also multiply that negative 1 by the positive 1 over here. Negative 1 times positive 1 would be a negative 1. Now I'm going to bring down my top equation, which is 8x minus 9y equals negative 23. So now when I look at my two new equations, I have opposites. I have a plus 9y and I have a minus 9y. So if I were to add these two equations together, negative 2x plus 8x would give me 6x, and negative 1 plus negative 23 would give me negative 24. The reason I didn't write down my y's is because they're opposites, which give me 0. It eliminates the y's from our problem. So now I can solve for my x by dividing by 6, and x equals negative 4. Once I have my answer, I can take and plug back into either one of the equations from the top in order to get my y. So I'm just going to choose the top one. We have 8 times our x, which is negative 4, minus 9y equals negative 23. 8 times negative 4 is negative 32, minus 9y equals negative 23. I have to add 32 to both sides, because now our goal is to get that y by itself. So we have negative 9y equals, we have to do 32 minus 23. We get 9. Divide both sides by negative 9. And y equals negative 1. Just a reminder, we want to write our final answer as a coordinate point, which will be negative 4, negative 1. When we look at the next problem, we look at our x's and we notice that they are not opposites and they're not even close to opposites. When we look at our y's, we see that we have both 10 y's. So what we can do is, again, choose to multiply one of them by negative 1 to create the opposites, because the opposite of positive 10y would be negative 10y. So I'm going to multiply the bottom by negative 1. So that's going to give me negative 9x plus negative 10y equals negative 26. I'm going to cross this out, bring down the first equation, 8x plus 10y equals 22. So now when I look at my problem, my y's have become opposites. I'm going to add these together. Negative 9x plus 8x gives me a negative 1x. My y's are opposites, so that gives me 0. And that equals negative 26 plus 22 would be negative 4. Divide both sides by negative 1, and x equals positive 4. I'm going to take that value and plug it into either one of the equations. I'm just going to choose the bottom one this time. So it's going to be 9 times 4 plus 10y equals 26. 9 times 4 is 36, plus 10y equals 26. Subtract 36 from both sides. We get 10y equals negative 10. Divide both sides by 10, and y equals negative 1. We'll write our answer as a coordinate point. We get 4, negative 1. If you wanted to check to see that you had the right answer, you plug your x and your y value into both of the original equations and it should work. So I'd plug in a 4 for both of my x's, I'd plug in a negative 1 for both of my y's, and it should work out. So for the first equation, 8 times 4 is 32, plus 10 times negative 1 is negative 10, and that equals 22, so it works out. On the next one, I get 36 plus negative 10 equals 26, and that one works out as well. When I go to my next equation, I notice that my x's are already opposites. Positive 4x is the opposite of a minus 4x. So this one I don't have to do anything. I can just go ahead and solve. So the opposites give me 0. Now I have to add the two equations together. A negative 1y plus a negative 10y's would give me negative 11y's. And 10 plus 12 gives me 22. So from here I divide by negative 11. And y equals negative 2. So now I'm going to plug in. I've got negative 4x minus 10 times negative 2. Negative 2, and that should equal 12. So we have negative 4x, a negative 10 times a negative 2 would be a positive 20, equals 12. We'll subtract 20 from both sides. Negative 4x equals negative 8. Divide by negative 4, and x equals positive 2. So we write our final answer as 2, negative 2. On the next problem, when I look at my x's, they are not opposites, but when I look at my y's, they are, which means the y's are the ones that we want to get rid of. They're opposites, so that would give us 0, and then we'll add our equations together. Negative 5x plus 4x would give me negative 1x, and 26 plus negative 19, we're just doing the subtraction, that would give us 7. Divide both sides by negative 1, and x equals negative 7. From here we can plug in to either equation. I'll say negative 5 times negative 7 plus y equals 26. So 35 plus y equals 26. Subtract 35 from both sides. And y equals, do your subtraction, 9. And it would be negative because we had more negatives than positives. So our final answer, negative 7, negative 9. When we look at the sixth problem, what I notice is that we do not have opposites with our x's, and we do not have opposites with our y's. So what has to happen now is we have to create the opposites. When I look at my x's, I have a negative 8x on top. If I wanted to create the opposite of negative 8x, I would need a positive 8x. And in order to create that, the bottom equation would have to be multiplied by 8. So right now I'm focusing on my x's. So if I multiplied 8 times x, I'd have the opposite of negative 8x, which is positive 8x. Plus 8 times 10y would be 80y, equals, and 8 times 20 would be 160. So I've recreated this second equation, and I'm going to bring down my first equation. When I add my two equations together, the 8x minus 8x gives me 0. 80 plus negative 3y would give me 77y. And 160 plus negative 6 would give me 154. I'd have to divide both sides by 77. and y would equal 2. From here, I can take my y and plug into either equation. I'm going to choose this one. So we have x plus 10 times y, which was 2, equals 20. So x plus 20 equals 20. We have to subtract 20 from both sides, and we get x equals 0. So for our final answer, we get 0, 2. So again, just to reiterate from the beginning, I chose to multiply this bottom equation by 8 so I could create the opposite of negative 8x. On the next problem, I do not have opposites with my x's, and I do not have opposites with my y's. But what I notice is 7 can go into 14, and so if I look at that bottom equation, I could create the opposite of a minus 14y by making this top one a positive 14y. In order to make it a positive 14y, I'd have to multiply everything on top by 2, so I'm going to do that. 2 times 6x would give me, or times negative 6x, would give me negative 12x, plus 2 times 7y would give me a positive 14y, and 2 times 12 would give me 24. So now when I look at my problem, if I add them up, negative 8x plus negative 12x would give me negative 20x. The y's now are opposites, which are 0, and that's going to equal 16 plus 24, which is 40. If I divide both sides by negative 20, I get x equals negative 2. From here, I have to plug back into either equation. I'm going to choose just the first one, negative 6 times negative 2 plus 7y equals 12. Negative 6 times negative 2 is 12, plus 7y equals 12. Subtract 12 from both sides. We get 7y equals 0. Divide by 7, and y equals 0. So our final answer would be negative 2, 0. We are going to get to these next couple equations in the next few days. So if you have any questions on what you've done so far, email me at sullivana@milton.k12.wi.us.